Shalom, my name is Yehonatan Ben Devoy. In the last video, we discussed what idolatry was. This video, I'm going to illustrate the historical, cultural evidence for the interpretation of idolatry, that it was changed by the church fathers. Moreover, I'm going to what I'm going to illustrate is the historical, cultural perspective for the interpretation of idolatry, that it was changed according to the church fathers, but rather that in the first century, in the Mishnah, they had a universal interpretation. And I'm going to use the words of the church fathers themselves. So let's get this underway. The historical narrative in the Second Temple period Judaism reveals that idolatry required an image / an idol. According to the Mishnah, if it didn't have an image, it didn't constitute idolatry. In fact, there was a lawful application for which to make a statue non-idolatrous. In fact, you had to destroy the ear or whatever, or destroy a part of the head or whatever, and that didn't constitute the image being worshipped at all, essentially. So with that stated, that means that ultimately each Jew had a lawful means by which they could have a statue, but not constituted to be idolatrous in nature. In fact, there's a means by which we can see this inside of the scriptures. In Numbers chapter 20, where they made an image of the snake, essentially. Or the cherubim on top of the ark. None of those were considered idolatrous, because Hashem basically commanded those to be made. Now, let's hear the words of the church fathers themselves. First one that we're going to use is Justin Martyr, who is as early as the first century. Here's what he said. "And neither do we honor with many sacrifices and garlands of flowers such deities as men have yet formed and set in shrines and called gods. Since we see these are soulless and dead, and have not the form of God, for we do not consider that God, such as a form, as such, say that they imitate his honor, but the names do we have those wicked demons, have they appeared? For we need to tell you, we who already know, into the forms of the craftsmen, carving and cutting, casting and hammering, fashion the materials." Here, Justin Martyr made it clear that that they were gods and that they had statues. Now, he was as early as the first century. All right? His view was that he would have been viewed as a typical first century Jew. Tertullian, now, on the other hand, he basically stated the following. "For now we have renounced the devil and his angels, if we make them. What divorce have we? I say not to whom, but dependent on whom we live. What discord have we entered into those who, under obligation for the sake of our maintenance, can you be denied with the tongue? What hand you confess? For the unmake by word, what by deed you make. Preach one God, you make so many. Preach true God, you make false ones. I make, says one, but I worship not. As I say, as if there were some cause for which he dare not worship, besides that which he ought not to make, the offense done to God, namely in case, nay, who make that which may not be worshipped, do worship, and you worship not. Sorry, technical difficulties. Anyways, I'm just going to summarize it, and it says, to them you emulate your ingenuity, to them you make your sweat a libation, to them you kindle the torch of your forethought. More are you to them a priest, since it is by means they have a priest, are your diligence is their divinity. Do you affirm that you worship not what you make? But they affirm not so, to whom you slay this fatter, more precious, greater victim, your salvation. Here Tertullian made the argument that these idols have a godhood that is your imaginations, your beliefs. But his worldview is anti-Jewish, because what if you're only making a statue? It's a good question. Just like what Moses did in Numbers chapter 20 or in Mishnah 3. You see, you have to deny the fact that basically there is that you can make these you can make statues, of which we see in several passages, Numbers 20 and also Exodus 25. If Hashem also commanded them not to make statues, as Tertullian supposes, then Hashem can't command them to build statues. Is that not correct? And such an act would constitute idolatry and would entail him making him violate his own word. Moreover, such a worldview would entail that basically behaviors would constitute idolatry. Or rather, desires, really. Unfortunately, it doesn't say this in Deuteronomy 6:5. Hashem actually commands us to serve him with our appetites. Since, why would Hashem command us to do something that's a violation of his commands? It's a good question. I mean, the language is very explicit. Ultimately, Tertullian and Justin Martyr, who were church fathers in different centuries, they didn't have a united worldview about what idolatry was. This fact ought to tell you that something was wrong, because Judaism only had one united worldview in the Mishnah. Therefore, it could stand to reason that they made up an interpretation in the 3rd century. Is that not valid?